The Velrani were small creatures, no bigger than a human child of 6 years old. They had soft blue fur that covered their thin bodies, large dark eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the galaxy, and long ears that folded back when they were scared. For 300 years, they had lived as slaves to the Krethian Empire, working in deep mines and dark factories, treated no better than tools to be used and thrown away when broken. Their home world of Velran Prime had been conquered long ago, before any living Velrani could remember freedom. The Krethians had come with their black warships and their terrible weapons. They had burned the Velrani cities to ash. They had killed anyone who resisted. They had taken the survivors and put them in chains, and that was how it had been ever since. The Velrani culture was almost forgotten now. Their songs existed only as whispers passed between slaves in the darkness of mine shafts. Their stories were told quickly and quietly, before the overseers could hear. Their numbers had dropped from billions to just a few million, scattered across Krethian space on worlds where they dug minerals from the ground until their hands bled and their spirits broke. Nobody in the galaxy cared about the Velrani. They were too small, too weak, too unimportant. The great empires of the galaxy looked away when Krethian ships carried Velrani slaves through their space. It was not their problem. The Velrani had nothing to offer. They had no resources worth fighting for, no technology worth stealing, no military power worth fearing. They were forgotten people, invisible to everyone except those who used them. The Galactic Council had rules about many things, but those rules did not protect the weak. The strong did what they wanted and the weak suffered. That was the way of the galaxy. That was the way it had always been. Then the humans came. Humanity was still new to the stars when they arrived in this part of the galaxy. They had only developed faster than light travel 200 years before, which made them children compared to empires that had ruled for thousands of years. They did not know all the rules yet. They did not know how things worked. Perhaps that was why they did what they did. The Terran colonial ship Aurora was looking for a place to build a new home. It carried 2,000 colonists, families who wanted to start fresh somewhere far from the crowded worlds of human space. They wanted land to farm, air to breathe, water to drink, and peace to raise their children. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge as the Aurora approached a small moon called Karis 7. It was at the edge of Krethian territory, a place that nobody seemed to want. The sensors showed water and breathable air and soil that could grow crops. It was not beautiful, but it would do. "Start landing procedures," Maria ordered. "This is going to be our new home." The colonists worked hard for the first few months. They were not soldiers or scientists or politicians. They were farmers and builders and teachers, ordinary people who wanted ordinary lives. They built houses from local stone and imported materials. They planted crops that could grow in the thin soil. They set up schools for the children and clinics for the sick. They created a small community in the gray hills of Karis 7. Maria Santos walked through the growing settlement every evening, checking on her people. She had been a colonial administrator for 20 years, and she knew how to build a community from nothing. She knew the importance of hope, of working together, of believing that tomorrow could be better than today. She did not know that everything was about to change. It was a young girl named Lily Chen who first found them. Lily was 8 years old, small for her age but brave beyond her years. Her parents were both engineers who spent long days building water systems for the colony. Lily spent her time exploring the rocky hills around the settlement with her dog, a brown and white terrier named Max. On a bright morning 3 months after landing, Lily wandered farther than usual. She climbed a tall hill and looked down into a valley filled with caves. Max ran ahead, barking at something Lily could not see. She followed him, her flashlight bouncing in her hand. She heard a sound coming from one of the caves. It was soft and sad, like crying. Lily stopped at the entrance and listened. Max whined beside her, his tail low. "Hello," Lily called. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped. There was only silence. Lily should have gone back to the colony. She should have told the adults. But she was a curious child, and she had never learned to be afraid of strangers. She crawled into the cave, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. There, huddled in the back of the cave, she found three creatures. They were thin and weak, their blue fur matted with dirt and dried blood. Two adults and one child holding each other tight. Their large, dark eyes were wide with terror. When they saw Lily, they screamed and pressed themselves against the cave wall. "It's okay," Lily said softly. She sat down on the ground and did not move. "I won't hurt you, I promise." The creatures stared at her. They did not understand her words, but something in her voice made them stop screaming. The child, a tiny thing with big ears and trembling hands, peeked out from behind the adults. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a food bar. It was the kind her mother packed for her adventures, sweet and filling. She broke off a piece and put it on the ground between them. "Are you hungry?" she asked. "This is good, you can have it." For a long time nobody moved. The cave was silent except for the soft breathing of scared creatures. Then the child crept forward slowly, carefully, ready to run at any moment. It grabbed the food and stuffed it into its mouth, eating so fast it almost choked. Lily felt her heart break a little. She had never seen anyone so hungry. She gave them all her food. Then she ran back to the colony to get more. Maria Santos was working in her office when Lily burst through the door, breathing hard and talking so fast that Maria could barely understand her. "Slow down, Lily. What did you find?" "People, blue people, in a cave. They're hurt and scared and hungry, and you have to help them." Maria followed the girl along with the colony doctor, James Wright. They brought blankets and medical supplies and food, enough for many people. Lily led them to the cave, and there they found the Velrani. Torin was the adult male. He had been protecting his mate Sella and their daughter Kiri for 2 years, ever since they escaped from a Krethian labor ship during a supply transfer. They had hidden on freighters and stolen food from trash bins and run from every shadow, always expecting to be caught and sent back to the mines. When they found Karis 7, they thought they had finally found a place to hide. Now aliens had found them, tall pink creatures with soft skin and strange faces. Torin put himself between the humans and his family, ready to fight, ready to die. He would not let them take Sella and Kiri without a fight. But the aliens did not reach for weapons. They reached for blankets. They reached for food. "It's all right," Maria said gently. She did not know if they could understand her, but she hoped her tone would carry her meaning. "We're not going to hurt you. Let us help." James Wright approached slowly, his hands raised to show he held nothing dangerous. He examined their wounds carefully, cleaning cuts and treating infections that had gone untreated for too long. Sella flinched at first, but the human's touch was gentle, and his medicine took away pain that she had carried for months. "They've been through something terrible," James said quietly to Maria. "These injuries are old, scars on top of scars, and the little one," he shook his head. "Nobody this young should have marks like these." Maria looked at the small family huddled together in the cave. She thought about her own children, grown now with families of their own. She thought about what she would feel if someone had hurt them the way these creatures had been hurt. "Bring them back to the colony," she said. "They're staying with us." Torin did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. He understood the way the human woman looked at him, not with greed or cruelty, but with something he had not seen in years, something that might have been kindness. He let them carry his family out of the cave. He did not know if he was making a mistake, but he knew that they could not survive much longer on their own, and these humans had given them food and medicine instead of chains. Perhaps that meant something. Perhaps it meant everything. The colony gave the Velrani family a small house near the medical clinic. It was simple but warm, with soft beds and a kitchen stocked with food. Kiri pressed her face against the window and watched the human children playing outside. her ears up with curiosity instead of down with fear. Word spread through the colony about the blue-furred aliens. The humans were curious but kind. Children brought toys for Kiri, strange objects that made noise or moved in interesting ways. Adults brought extra food, more than the Velrani could eat. The colony tailor made new clothes for them, soft and warm and sized for their small bodies. "Why are you doing this?" Torin asked Maria one evening. He had learned enough human words to make himself understood, and Maria had learned to speak slowly and clearly. "We have nothing to give you. We cannot work in your mines. We have no value." Maria looked at him with a strange expression on her face, something Torin could not read. "Value? Torin, your people. You don't need to have value to deserve kindness." Torin did not understand. In the Krethian Empire, everything had value or it was worthless. That was the law of the galaxy. That was the way of all things. But these humans seemed to follow different laws, laws that made no sense but felt right in some deep way that Torin could not explain. Weeks passed. The Velrani family grew stronger. Kiri began to play with the human children, learning their games and teaching them some of her own. She learned to laugh again, a sound she had never made before in her short life. Lily Chen became her best friend, and they were always together, running through the fields or playing with Max the dog or sitting under trees and trying to teach each other words in their different languages. Torin started to help with the farming. He was good with plants, and the humans welcomed his knowledge. He knew things about soil and seeds that they had never learned, and they listened when he spoke. Sela taught the colony children songs from her home world, songs she had thought were lost forever. She cried the first time she heard human children singing in the Velrani language. For the first time in their lives, they were not slaves. They were neighbors. They were friends. Then the Krethian ship came. It appeared in orbit around Karis 7 on a bright morning, a dark shape against the blue sky. The colonists looked up at the shadow blocking the sun, and fear touched their hearts. They did not know what this ship wanted, but they could feel that it meant nothing good. Maria Santos felt cold fear in her stomach, but she pushed it down. She had dealt with hard situations before. She walked to the edge of the colony and waited. The Krethian commander was called Vextorath. He was tall and covered in hard black plates like armor, with red eyes that held no warmth and no mercy. When his shuttle landed outside the colony, he did not wait to be invited. He walked into the settlement like he owned it, his soldiers following behind him. "You have stolen property of the Krethian Empire," he said to Maria. His voice was like grinding metal, harsh and cold. 3 Velrani slaves escaped from a transport ship 2 years ago. We have tracked them here. Return them immediately." Maria stood between Vextorath and the colony. Behind her, she could see Torin watching from a doorway, holding Kiri close to his chest. His ears were flat against his head, and his eyes were full of terror. He had heard that voice before in the mines and the factories. He knew what it meant. "They're not property," Maria said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "They're people, and they're part of our colony now." Vextorath made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Human, you clearly do not understand how things work in this galaxy. The Velrani belong to the Krethian Empire. They have always belonged to us. We conquered their world before your species learned to build cities. Return them to us or face the consequences." "No." The word was simple, it was quiet, but it changed everything. Vextorath's red eyes narrowed. He had been a commander for 60 years, and no one had ever refused him so directly. "You are making a serious mistake. Your small colony cannot stand against the Krethian Empire. We have 1,000 warships and armies that have crushed 100 worlds. You have nothing but farmers and children." Maria smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that her enemy did not know. "We have something you don't understand, Commander. Those Velrani are ours now. They're part of our family, and humans protect their family." She activated her communication device. a small unit on her wrist that could send signals across the stars. "This is Captain Maria Santos of Karis 7 Colony to Terran Colonial Authority. We have a situation here. Code family." Vextoreth did not know what those words meant. He would learn soon enough. The message traveled faster than light, bouncing through relay stations across human space. It reached Earth in hours. It reached every human colony and every human ship. Code family. 2 words that every human knew, 2 words that had been written into the colonial charter 100 years ago. When humans adopt someone, when humans take someone into their community and call them family, that person becomes human in all the ways that matter. They are protected by the full force of humanity. Every colony, every ship, every soldier, every resource. It was a promise that humanity had made to itself, a promise born from the dark parts of human history. Humans knew what it meant to be enslaved, to be conquered, to be treated as less than people. They had done it to each other long ago, and they had sworn never to let it happen again. Not to humans, not to anyone they called their own. Admiral Chen Wei was eating dinner with his grandchildren when the message reached him. He was an old man with white hair and hands that had commanded fleets, but his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still quick. He read the message twice, then stood up so fast that his chair fell over. "Get me fleet command," he said into his communicator. "Right now, this is an emergency." All across human space, ships began to move. They came from Earth and Mars and the colonies of Alpha Centauri. They came from mining stations and research posts and military bases. They came because the call had gone out, and every human knew what that call meant. Family was in danger, family needed help. And humans always came for family. On Karis 7, Vextoreth gave Maria 3 days to hand over the Velrani. He returned to his ship, confident that the small human colony would see reason. They had no military. They had no real defenses. They were farmers and builders and teachers, not warriors. They would understand that they could not fight the Krethian Empire. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, Vextoreth looked at his sensors and felt something he had never felt before in his long military career. Fear. The sky above Karis 7 was full of ships, human ships, hundreds of them, battleships with weapons that could crack planets, carriers loaded with fighters, frigates fast enough to run down any enemy. They had come from every corner of human space, jumping in one after another until the scanners could barely count them all. Admiral Chen Wei's face appeared on Vextoreth's communication screen. "This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet," the old human said. His voice was calm and cold, the voice of a man who had seen war and did not fear it. "You are threatening members of our family. You have 2 options. Leave now and we will forget this happened. Stay, and we will show you what happens when you threaten those under human protection." Vextoreth stared at the fleet. His single warship was powerful, one of the best in the Krethian Navy. But against this armada it was nothing. He could fight and die, but he could not win. "They are just Velrani," he said. His voice was confused and angry. "They are slaves. They are worth nothing. Why would you risk war for creatures like them?" Admiral Chen's eyes were hard as stone. "Because they are ours, and that is all that matters." Vextoreth thought about his options. He thought about pride and about the honor of the Krethian Empire. He thought about his duty and his orders. Then he thought about his crew, the soldiers who served him, who would die in the cold darkness of space for 3 slaves worth less than the fuel his ship burned. He made his choice. His ship turned and jumped away, running back to Krethian space with its tail between its legs. The human fleet did not follow. They had made their point. On the ground, Torin watched the Krethian ship disappear. Tears ran down his blue fur, and he did not try to hide them. Kiri was jumping up and down, cheering with the human children. Sela held Maria's hands, unable to speak past the emotions choking her throat. "You did this for us," Torin whispered. You brought all those ships, all those weapons for us, for 3 Velrani that nobody in the galaxy cares about. Maria put a hand on his shoulder. Your family now, Torin, that's what family does, that's what we do. But the story was not over, it was only beginning. News of what happened on Karis 7 spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could fly. The Velrani slaves in Krethian space heard whispers in the mines and factories. A human colony had protected 3 of their kind. They had brought a fleet of warships. They had faced down the Krethian Empire and won without firing a single shot. It was impossible, it was a dream, but the whispers said it was true. Velrani began to run. They escaped from mines and factories, from ships and stations. They did not know where to go, but they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had to find the humans. Some died trying to escape. Some were caught and punished terribly, but some made it. They stole onto freighters and hid in cargo holds. They walked across frozen moons and burning deserts. They did whatever it took to reach the colony called Karis 7, the place where humans lived, the place where Velrani could be free. Maria Santos watched her small colony grow. More Velrani arrived every week, thin and scared and covered in scars. The colonists took them in, 1 by 1, then 10 by 10, then 100 by 100. They built more houses. They planted more crops. They made room. We can't save all of them, James Wright told Maria one night. They were sitting in her office, looking at reports that showed more Velrani arriving every day. There are millions of Velrani still in Krethian space. We don't have the resources. We don't have the space. We can't save them all. Maria looked at the doctor. Her eyes were tired but determined. Then we better get started. We'll do what we can. We'll save as many as we can. And maybe, just maybe, we'll save all of them. She sent another message to Earth. This time, she did not ask for warships. She asked for something more important. She asked for help. The response came within days. Charity ships loaded with food and medicine and building supplies. Colony ships carrying builders and teachers and doctors who wanted to help. Refugee assistance teams with decades of experience helping people rebuild their lives. Humanity was moving, not with weapons this time, but with open hands and open hearts. The Galactic Council watched with confusion. They did not understand what the humans were doing. The Velrani had nothing to offer. They had no valuable skills, no useful technology, no military power. Why waste resources on them? Why risk conflict with the Krethian Empire for creatures that everyone else in the galaxy ignored? Ambassador Thomas Rivera stood before the council and tried to explain. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, and he had spent his whole career trying to help others understand humanity. In human history, we have seen what happens when good people do nothing while evil happens. We have seen our own kind enslaved, murdered, forgotten. We made mistakes that haunt us to this day, and we swore an oath. Never again. Not for us and not for anyone. The Krethian representative laughed. It was a harsh sound like metal scraping against metal. Pretty words, human, but the Velrani are property of the Krethian Empire under galactic law. Your interference is illegal. You are stealing from us. Rivera smiled. Then change the law because we're not stopping, not today, not ever. The council debated for months. The Krethians threatened war. Other empires warned the humans to stay out of matters that did not concern them. They said that the humans were young and foolish, that they did not understand how the galaxy worked, that they would regret their actions. The humans ignored them all. On Karis 7, the colony had become a city. 50,000 Velrani lived there now, alongside the original human settlers. They had built schools where Velrani children learned to read and write, where they learned history and science and mathematics. They had hospitals where Velrani doctors trained to heal their people, learning from human teachers who shared their knowledge freely. They had workshops where Velrani craftspeople rediscovered skills that had been lost for generations. making beautiful things that no one had seen for 300 years. Torin had become a leader among his people. He worked with Maria to organize the refugees, to find them homes and jobs and hope. He spoke for the Velrani in meetings with human leaders, explaining what his people needed and how they could contribute to their new home. His daughter Kiri was now 12 years old. She spoke perfect English and perfect Velrani, along with 3 other languages she had learned from books and videos. She was at the top of her class in school, a curious and determined student who wanted to understand everything about the galaxy. "I want to be a diplomat when I grow up," she told her father one evening. They were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the gray hills orange and gold. "I want to speak for our people among the stars. I want to help others like the humans helped us." Torin held his daughter close. He remembered the cave where they had hidden, starving and hopeless. He remembered the little human girl with the food bar, the first kindness they had known in years. "You will," he said. "You will show them all what the Velrani can be." But the Krethians were not finished. They had lost face before the entire galaxy. A small species of worthless slaves had defied them, protected by upstart newcomers who did not know their place. This insult could not stand. The Krethian emperor demanded revenge. The Krethian military began to plan. They gathered intelligence about the human colony. They learned its defenses, its weaknesses, its population. They calculated how many ships they would need, how many soldiers, how much firepower. They prepared for war. They thought they were ready. They were wrong. The attack came without warning. 15 Krethian warships jumped into the Keras 7 system with their weapons already charging, their soldiers ready for battle. The orbital defense platforms that the humans had built in the 2 years since the first confrontation lit up with desperate energy, firing at the incoming ships. Maria Santos was not surprised. She had known this day would come. She had hoped it would not, but she had prepared for it anyway. That was what leaders did. They hoped for the best and prepared for the worst. "All civilians to the emergency shelters," she ordered through the city speakers. Her voice was calm and steady, the voice of someone who would not let fear control her. "Defense forces to your positions. Medical teams prepare for casualties. And someone get me a line to Admiral Chen." The human fleet was hours away. The colony had to hold until help arrived. The colonists fought. Humans and Velrani stood side by side behind walls of stone and steel, firing weapons they had trained with for months. They were not soldiers. They were farmers and builders and teachers and doctors. But they had practiced for this moment, drilled for this day. They knew what was at stake. Torin was at the eastern wall when the first wave of Krethian soldiers hit. He had never held a weapon before coming to Keras 7, but the humans had taught him how to shoot, how to fight, how to protect those he loved. The rifle felt too big in his small hands, but he did not let that stop him. Beside him was James Wright, the doctor who had healed his family on that first day, who had treated his wounds with gentle hands and kind words. James was not a soldier either, but he stood at the wall with everyone else, fighting to protect the community they had all built together. "I never thought I would die in battle," Torin said during a pause in the fighting. Explosions echoed across the city, and smoke filled the air. James checked his weapon and reloaded. "We're not dying today, Torin. Help is coming." "How do you know?" James looked at him with calm certainty in his eyes. "Because that's what humans do. We come for our family. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it is, we come." The battle raged for 3 hours. The Krethians were professional soldiers, trained and equipped for war. The colonists were ordinary people with basic weapons and desperate courage, but they held their ground. They fought for every street, every building, every inch of their home. They were pushed back slowly. They lost good people, humans and Velrani both, friends and neighbors who died protecting their community. Maria felt each loss like a knife in her heart, but she kept going. She kept fighting. She kept leading. Then the sky lit up. The Terran fleet arrived like an avalanche of steel and fire. 500 warships, more than anyone had thought possible, more than the Krethians had expected. They fell upon the enemy attackers with terrible fury, and the battle in space was over in minutes. On the ground, Commander Vextoreth heard the screaming of his officers as ship after ship was destroyed. He had insisted on leading this attack personally, wanting revenge for his humiliation 2 years ago. Now he looked up at the sky full of human vessels and knew that he had lost. But he had one last card to play. "If I cannot have the Velrani," he growled to his aide, "no one will." He pulled out a device, a small trigger for the bombs his troops had planted throughout the city during the battle. One press and everything would be destroyed. The humans, the Velrani, the colony that had defied his empire. It would be nothing but fire and ash. Maria saw him across the battlefield. She was too far away to reach him, too far to stop him. She could only watch as his finger moved toward the button, as everything they had built was about to disappear. But she was not the only one watching. Kiri had not gone to the shelter with the other children. She had followed her father to the wall, determined to fight for her home. She was small, smaller than any human child her age, but she was fast, faster than anyone expected. She ran. She hit Vextoreth from the side, a small blue blur of determination and courage. The device flew from his hand and skittered across the ground. Kiri tried to grab it, but Vextoreth was faster. He roared with rage and grabbed her by the throat, lifting her small body off the ground. His armored hand began to squeeze. "Stupid little slave," he hissed, his red eyes burning with hatred. "You die first, then your precious colony." Kiri looked into his eyes without fear. She was choking, struggling to breathe, but she did not look away. "I'm not a slave," she gasped. "I'm family." The shot took Vextoreth through the eye. He fell backward, his grip loosening, his body crashing to the ground. Kiri dropped and rolled away, coughing and gasping for air. Torrin stood behind her, his rifle still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. His hands were shaking, but his aim had been true. He had never killed anyone before this day, but for his daughter, for his family, he would do anything. Around them, Krethian soldiers were dropping their weapons and surrendering. Without their commander, without their ships, they had nothing left to fight for. The battle was over. Maria reached Torrin and Kiri as the smoke began to clear. She hugged them both, this Velrani father and daughter who had become so important to her, to the whole colony. "You saved us," she said to Kiri. Her voice was thick with emotion. "You saved everyone." Kiri shook her head. Her throat was bruised and her voice was rough, but her eyes were bright. "No, we saved each other. That's what family does." The Battle of Karis 7 changed the galaxy. The Krethian Empire had attacked a human colony and lost. More than that, they had attacked a colony that included protected species, people that humanity had officially claimed as their own. The humans demanded justice, and this time they had the power to make their demands stick. The Galactic Council was forced to act. They had ignored the humans before, dismissed them as newcomers who did not understand how things worked. But after seeing what human fleets could do, after watching the Krethian Navy burn in the skies above Karis 7, they could not ignore humanity anymore. Under pressure from the Terran government, the Council passed new laws. Slavery was banned throughout Council space. No species could own another species. Any people under human protection were to be treated with full rights and dignity, like any other citizens of the galaxy. The Velrani were free. Not just the ones on Karis 7, but all of them, everywhere in the galaxy. The humans sent ships to every world where Velrani were held, to every mine and factory and labor camp. They did not ask permission. They did not negotiate. They simply arrived in their warships and said, "These people are coming with us." The Krethians protested. They threatened. They raged at the Galactic Council and demanded that the old laws be restored, but they did not fight. They had learned what happened when they fought the humans over family. They had seen their fleet destroyed and their commander killed. They did not want to see it again. In the years that followed, the Velrani rebuilt their civilization. With human help, they reclaimed their home world of Velran Prime. They rebuilt their cities and restored their temples. They rediscovered their history, their culture, their identity as a people. They remembered the songs that had been passed down in whispers. They told the stories that had survived in darkness. They became a people again, not just survivors but a civilization with a past and a future. And they never forgot. Every Velrani child learned the story of Lily Chen, the little girl who shared her food with strangers in a cave. They learned about Maria Santos, who said no to an empire. They learned about the humans who came with their ships and their open hands and their strange belief that every person had value, no matter how small or weak or forgotten. Torin lived to see his people free. He became the first Velrani ambassador to Earth, standing before the United Nations to speak words that would be remembered forever. "You asked nothing of us," he said to the assembled humans. His voice was old now but strong. "You wanted no resources, no technology, no power. You simply saw people who were suffering and you decided to help. In all my years as a slave, I never imagined such beings existed, but you do. And because of you, so do we. Thank you. From all of us forever, thank you." Kiiri became a diplomat just as she had dreamed. She traveled the galaxy, speaking for the Velrani and for all the species that had been forgotten. When she found others who were enslaved or abused, she did not look away. She helped them, just as she had been helped. "That's what humans taught me," she would say. "That's what being family means. You don't leave anyone behind." Other species began to seek human protection. They had heard the stories. They knew what had happened to the Velrani. They knew that when humans said they would protect you, they meant it. The Terran Colonial Charter was updated, its language clear and simple. Any species that joined a human colony, any people that humans adopted as their own, would be protected by all of humanity. Every ship, every soldier, every resource, forever. The galaxy's old empires thought this was foolish. Resources spent on the weak were resources wasted. Protecting species that had nothing to offer made no sense. But they also noticed something strange as the years passed. The species under human protection did not stay weak. With education and opportunity, they grew strong. They developed skills and talents that no one had expected. They contributed to human society and to the galaxy in ways that no one had predicted. The Velrani became famous for their art and their music. Other protected species became scientists and doctors and teachers. Perhaps some of the old empires began to think, the humans were not so foolish after all. Perhaps there was wisdom in kindness that the rest of the galaxy had never understood. Maria Santos lived out her days on Karis 7, which had grown from a small colony to a great city. Humans and Velrani and a dozen other species walked its streets together, worked together, raised families together. It was a new kind of civilization, one built not on conquest or exploitation, but on something simpler. On the idea that everyone matters, that everyone deserves a chance, that when you find someone in need, you help them, you make them family. She died at the age of 92, surrounded by loved ones of many species. Her last words were spoken to Kiiri, who held her hand at the end. "Keep going," Maria whispered. "Keep helping. That's all that matters. That's all that ever matters." Kiiri promised, and she kept that promise for the rest of her life. 50 years after the Battle of Karis 7, Lily Chen returned to the cave where it had all begun. She was an old woman now, her hair white and her steps slow. But she had never forgotten that morning when she was 8 years old, when she shared her food with strangers and changed the galaxy. The cave was part of a memorial now, preserved exactly as it had been. A plaque outside told the story in a dozen languages, for visitors from a dozen worlds. Millions of people came every year, humans and Velrani and others, to see where it all started. Lily sat down on a rock inside the cave and remembered. She remembered being curious and unafraid. She remembered the sound of crying in the darkness. She remembered 3 thin, scared creatures who had never known kindness. A Velrani woman approached her. She was middle-aged now, her blue fur streaked with gray, her face lined with age. But Lily recognized her immediately. "Kiri," she said and smiled. The former ambassador sat beside her old friend. They were both old now, both tired from lives full of work and struggle and triumph. But they were here together in the place where everything changed. "I think about that day a lot," Kiri said softly. "I think about what would have happened if you hadn't come, if you hadn't shared your food." Lily smiled. "I was just hungry for adventure. I didn't know I was changing the galaxy." "Nobody ever does," Kiri said. "That's the thing about kindness. You never know how far it will travel. You never know who it will help. You just do it because it's the right thing to do, and sometimes it changes everything." They sat together as the sun set, 2 old women who had been children together, who had grown up in a new world that they had helped create. Behind them, the city glowed with light. Humans and Velrani and a dozen other species lived there now, all part of one great family. It had started with a food bar in a cave, a little girl sharing what she had with strangers in need. It had grown into something wonderful, a civilization built on kindness, a galaxy changed by compassion. And it would continue, long after they were gone, spreading across the stars like light spreading from a single source. That was the promise humanity had made. That was the promise they kept. When Terran colonists adopt alien species, those species become protected by humanity. That was the law, but it was more than a law. It was a promise. It was a statement about what humanity believed, about who they chose to be. The Velrani thrived. They built ships and cities and works of art that moved people to tears. They developed new technologies and new philosophies. They became one of the most respected species in the galaxy, known for their wisdom and their kindness. And whenever anyone asked how they had risen so far from slavery and despair, they told the same story. The story of a little girl with a food bar. The story of a captain who said no. The story of a fleet that came to protect 3 refugees hiding in a cave. The story of humanity. In the grand history of the galaxy, many empires rose and fell. They conquered and enslaved, they exploited and destroyed. Their names were forgotten and their monuments crumbled to dust. But the humans were different. They built something that lasted, not through force but through family, not through fear but through love. And in the end, it was the reason they were remembered. Long after their ships turned to rust and their cities fell to ruin, the memory of humanity survived. In 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 stories, beings who had never met a human knew what they stood for. They stood for family. They stood for hope. They stood for the belief that no one is worthless, no one is forgotten, no one is alone. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not weapons or technology or power. Just kindness. Just family. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.